welcome to this CTO talk, where we have, as usual, a CTO, someone doing the job, from whom we will learn also today. We basically have the same set of questions as for every invited people to CTO talk, and that's half of my responsibility, and the other half is from the audience. So your questions. So it will be a better CTO talk if you manage to ask your questions as well, and I will stop from time to time our conversation with Florin so that you can ask them. So Florin, welcome to the CTO talk. Say a few words about yourself and about the wonderful company you represent.
Hi, Cornel. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite. I'm just going to share a few things about my professional background. So I've been in technology for 15 years or so. Started into some technical support initially, but moved into development rather quickly. And after some years working as a developer, I went into team leading, team management. Later down the road, I got a chance to move into consultancy, so both on the technical side, so development, and then later into process. I've done some agile coaching. And then eventually moved into management and delivery management in both product companies and consultancy companies. So I've seen smaller organizations, larger organizations as well. And I am currently CTO at Flip. I've been with the company for close to 2 years now, I guess.
Okay. Let's start with the basics. We have our own definition about the CTO role, the ideal CTO. What's your definition of an ideal CTO?
Well, I'll have to combine it with my experience at Flip. I think the ideal CTO is not something that is constant in time, but it's something that changes. The role changes with the organization as the organization changes as well in time. Because there's of course different stages. You go through hypergrowth, you go to profitability, and so on and so forth. Especially when looking at startups. And then you will have different responsibilities. Back when I joined Flip, I think Flip had at the time around 80, 90 people or so. It was just getting into a hypergrowth phase. There was no technology department at the time. And I would say that my initial responsibilities were a bit more on the operational side. So basically creating a team, getting the right people on board and creating a technology department, and then taking some let's say, internal ownership of the already existing platforms, getting things in motion. And today I would say that the role has changed a bit because the company has changed a bit. So we are now close to 170 people within Flip. And we have a technology department with about 30 people currently. So nowadays, I think my role is a bit less operational and moving towards the strategical side of things. It's always been a mix between the two, of course, but then I've seen it shifting during these past 2 years. And now I'm a bit closer to the company strategy and vision and making sure that we have the right product roadmap in place, working with our great product team as well, and making sure that we leverage technology as much as possible in helping Flip's customers and helping the business grow as well.
So you've talked about strategy. Please tell me how much you agree with the following statement. Business strategy is technology strategy.
It's an interesting question, and I think it's sometimes within Flip at least it's maybe a little bit of a debate. Some people see us as a product company. Some people see us as a technology company. So I think it's a never-ending debate. I think one doesn't work without the other. think if you think of them as two circles, like a Venn diagram, they overlap quite a lot. So not necessarily one driving the other or the other way around, but rather enabling each other. And to this point, we have a rather clear business strategy, let's say. So we know where we want to go, we know how we want to expand, we know how our product, how we want our product to look like in a year from now, let's say. But we cannot do it without technology. And then there's of course parts of the technology strategy as well, which sometimes support the business strategy, sometimes maybe they hinder it, but maybe hinder it is too strong of a word. But rather we sometimes try to take business decisions looking at what we can do in technology at the same time.
Still related to technology and business, we've talked in private about the importance of the CTO being a translator, playing a translator role.
Yeah.
The original role of a CTO was to translate business to technology, technology to business. It was especially into research facilities, so that these companies who invented the role of CTO ensure there is return on investment of what we do there. So how much of this is true for your implementation of the CTO role, the translator role?
It is very much true. It's something that happens constantly. I think with myself starting in Flip without having a technology department in place, it kind of came naturally within the organization that we had and we have non-tech founders, and of course their needs and the way we understand our customer needs as well. We needed to translate those into what needs to happen in technology. So this is something that happens all the time, and we are investing more and more around that. When we started initially building our technology department, we didn't have a product team, for example. So everything was a bit chaotic, and you had me trying to explain over the phone or Slack or WhatsApp or whatever needs to be done. So it's a very I don't know, primitive, let's call it. But now it's getting better and better, and we have a better process in place, and we try to improve it. And I think the translation thing has there's two sides of the coin, because yeah, of course, you need within a startup you need to take the business needs and the customer needs and translate them into technology. But I feel like sometimes it's we easily forget to translate the other way around. So that was the thing that I was mentioning a little bit earlier, where business strategy is driven by technology, because we in technology try to express as businessy as possible, if that's a word, what can be done, what cannot be done, and then all of the compromises that we need to make in both directions. So sometimes we will compromise some speed for scalability, for quality, for things like that. And other times we might sacrifice and expose ourselves to risks like working with multiple programming languages just for the sake of progressing the product roadmap.
In terms of what's going to happen or not, you're working here with at the strategy level with the executive officer, the executive management, or is mostly you, or who's saying that? How does it work?
I'm one of the lucky ones. I work very close with the founders and with the other executives. We've built quite a strong executive team, and we have get-togethers and we meet very frequently, and we try to decide as a group. So we don't necessarily have one decision maker, but we try to decide together. When I joined Flip, I was the first director to be onboarded, so I got to spend a lot of time with the founders, and we work very closely together. Later down the road, more people have joined, and now we have people more competent in other areas than we were back when I joined. And I think it's crucial. I think it's it doesn't work without a very strong relationship between a CTO and other executives. So it's not just the CEO, if you ask me. You need a strong relationship with your CFO, for example, with your commercial, with even with your B2B department. You need to work very closely with all departments. So I was a bit lucky in that regard. And it doesn't just help with the translation that we were mentioning a little bit earlier, but it helps with building trust as well, and it makes your life easier. So yeah, go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah, how much time you spend with the executives, like with the executive officer in general? Like, is it 1 hour per week in general? Is it half a day a week, 20 hours a month? If you can estimate that, and with the executives in general.
Well, it's sometimes fragmented now that we're a larger organization and there's so many things to do. But if I were to try and quantify it, wet finger in the air, I would say probably spend around 8 hours a week with other executives and founders. I'm including the founders here as well.
And if you'd have to choose between, like, what's your favorite team? The executive team or the operations team, like those who are doing the work eventually?
It really depends who's in the audience. My answer depends on that. I'm joking, of course. I think you need both. You cannot succeed with just one and without the other. So I think there's different forces and different interactions that you get between your teams and people working on the operational side or building stuff, and then the executive team as well. And maybe you have your external customers or shareholders and stuff like that. And you constantly, as a CTO, I think you constantly have to balance these things and work as closely as possible with everybody, because your work will impact everybody as well. So I feel like the CTO role is somewhere in the middle of things, and you need to open communication channels both ways with everybody around yourself.
Let's talk about this communication. I'm gonna challenge you a bit. It's like technical debt. Everyone is talking about it. How do you share that with your executives?
So how do I share the what?
Information about technical debt, how you evolve it, and it would be great if you can share also some sort of definition of technical debt with the audience, because everyone has her own definition of technical debt.
Right. You are indeed challenging me. So what I was mentioning a bit earlier about the relationship with the other executives, you need that trust-based relationship to be there, so that you don't get into all sorts of discussions which are not taking you anywhere. In terms of technical debt and how we negotiate how much technical debt we tackle or we don't tackle, it's actually not a negotiation and not necessarily a discussion. So what we do is that we know that we have some technical debt, we know that we have to pay our technical debt, and we simply plan for it. And from my perspective, it's non-negotiable with shareholders, executives, and so on and so forth, because if we don't pay the technical debt, the interest will start hurting us a bit more in the future. So it's something that fortunately happens rather smoothly in Flip. We just say that we need to do this kind of thing, and we have full control on our own decision. And if I can take it a step further around technical debt and how we tackle it within the teams, we are trying to give the teams as much autonomy as possible. So I now wish for, I don't want to say expect, but rather wish for, or from my teams, that they raise the technical debt issue themselves. And we have really good people in our team, and they do it frequently, and they ask for time for technical debt. And then there are situations in which we need to do something, maybe build something new, and we have two options. Do it like how we call it quick and dirty, and adapting whatever is there and working around technical debt, or we can decide to rewrite a larger chunk of our platform that helps us in the future. And we try to balance those decisions because we cannot always 100% focus on rewriting and doing stuff right from the first time, because we all make mistakes. It's only natural. And then the discussion, as our relationship is based on trust, it's rather easy. I simply tell people, I know I'm very lucky, but I simply tell the other executive that this is not something that needs to be done. And there's enough trust in there so that we don't challenge each other mindlessly over things like, I know, velocity, how fast is something going to be released, and so on and so forth. It is a little bit of a negotiation with the teams themselves, but that's because they have a very healthy desire of tackling technical debt, which is it's really great from my perspective. But they also understand the business perspective. They're very hungry for information around what's happening in the business, how we're performing, even financially speaking. And then they also understand when we have to balance one way or another. But in the end, I strongly support my teams to take their own decisions. And if they're going to tell me that something needs to be rewritten or we need to pay some technical debt, that's what we're going to do.
We are usually talking about technology, and we always take into account the fact that it's never just technology, it's social technology. So let's take it from the technical debt to efficiency management, governance.
Mm-hmm.
First, is governance a topic? Is it still reasonable to talk about governance? What's your definition about governance? What are you doing around here?
Okay, so when I think of governance, I think of efficiency, which you've mentioned, and some ways of measuring that what you're doing in technology actually supports the business into its vision and going in the right direction. I think we don't do enough governance currently. I feel like it's something that needs to happen more in our organization, at least. But it's happening. I mean, we're not doing enough of it because there is the constant struggle I was mentioning between doing the things right and doing the right things, and also sometimes sacrificing some speed, having some longer deadlines or go to market, go to prod for some things. And we've had cases in which we've mindlessly developed something that looked great on paper or in a particular meeting. And then we figured that it doesn't have a return on the investment. So like, I guess, or hope any other company, we wasted some energy and time, but we try to learn from that. And we try to be a little bit better. But what we don't do, or what I don't do in the CTO role, is I'm not translating any kind of progress measurement into the business. Anything else except when do we think that something on the product roadmap we can get it done. So I'm not discussing story points with anyone. I'm not discussing absolute or relative estimations with anyone. It's just mostly, okay, we have this project to implement. We try to understand it as good as possible. We're going to provide a ballpark figure around the roadmap and across the fiscal year. We might be off. We sometimes are off. Luckily, sometimes we deliver a bit earlier. Sometimes we deliver a little bit later, but it's not necessarily something that we actively monitor from a more holistic approach, from a more broader approach from the business level.
Do you have a favorite way, KPI, performance, activity indicator, measurement that you usually invoke in your leadership to make the link between the business, the performance of what you do? Is there anything share with us?
So something in between the business and technology, right?
Performance. Think of performance.
Yeah. So performance-wise, what I try to look at is, let's say, reliability. or being accurate in your estimations. Okay, we're doing relative estimations. We have some velocities within our teams, but those you can translate velocity into into time, right? Because you look at your velocity, you have a rough, larger estimation, and you know it's going to take you 10 sprints, 5 sprints, 1 sprint, whatever, to do something. So you have a ballpark figure. So what we strive for is being as accurate as possible in terms of working with the product roadmap and with the business. Now, there's of course uncertainty, which ideally or theoretically should be included in the estimations. When you do relative estimations, you should consider uncertainty as well. And that sometimes hurts us. Of course, we discover things a bit too late, or we change our mind. It happens. But that's one way of looking at things. But there's maybe a more interesting metric that I like to look at within the teams rather than outside towards the business. I like to look at, again, predictability, but predictability in terms of how much you deviate from your, let's say, sprint goal. So a team decides that they're going to take into a sprint, let's say 100 story points, just as an example. If that team delivers 70 story points, but then next sprint, they also take 100 story points, but again delivers 70 story points. Next sprint, they take 100 story points. They also deliver 70 story points. For me, that's ideal, because for me, the constant is that they are delivering 70 story points every sprint. So I don't really care that now we're taking 100 points into the sprint, because if you just look at points, that's very easy to work around, of course, around story points. But rather the deviation from one sprint to another of what actually gets delivered and the value that you actually provide to your external stakeholders. So I always tell teams, don't strive for more story points into your sprints. Strive for having constant delivery, because that's what makes you reliable, and then it makes us reliable as a technology department into the business view as well.
So when you're talking about reliability, was more like estimations reliability, forecast reliability, not necessarily site reliability, or right?
Yeah, maybe that was a poor wording. I think I was thinking more of predictability rather than reliability. Now, reliability in our case is also really, really important. And then we've had an amazing Black Friday last year as well. It is an important metric, but it is also a little bit unpredictable in a startup environment where we strive to get things to production as early as possible and as frequently as possible. It can fluctuate happily, it doesn't happen, and I feel like our quality levels are quite high.
A curiosity, you've rolled out some countries already.
Yeah.
When you plan for a new country, so not getting into details about strategy, and don't say anything confidential or things like this, but how reliable is what you get as inputs from the team? Is that going smoothly already, or it's always like you feel like you're struggling and there are lots of things to be handled that weren't foreseen?
Right, and I really like this question because it's one of the examples where we had to make some compromise. Roughly 5 to 6 months after I joined with no technology department, 6 months later, we were launching a new country for Flip. The way we've done it was not ideal from a technical perspective, but what happened is that we took some very early decisions that allow us today actually to release a country a lot faster than we did the first time. And we've kind of initially sacrificed some things, and to be totally honest, we just took our entire website, made a copy of it, changed it for the new country, deployed it, and everything, almost everything went very smoothly. But then along the way, the technical debt that we were mentioning a little bit earlier, and we were very aware of the fact that we're going to launch new countries and we're going to keep launching new countries. We knew that we need to make the process a little bit better. So we've started joining the back end and the front end, and then introducing like translation frameworks or third-party apps for translations on our website, so that today a new country is really, really predictable for us. We had the third country we went into was a lot.
Congratulations.
Sorry?
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was a lot quicker than the first one, and we know that the third one, the fourth one we're going to be present in is going to be even faster than that. And it's part of the technology strategy that allows you to easily scale. We know that Flip grows both geographically and in terms of product lines. So we need to prepare our platform for this kind of expansion, and we need to invest our efforts. So the team is always looking on the lookout for opportunities to make our lives a bit easier in the future, knowing what kind of things we want to do.
And you managed to learn from rollout of a country to another country and make it better and better.
100%, yeah, definitely. And after the larger projects and the more ambitious ones, we do lessons learned. We've tried to do pre-mortem exercises as well, which are always interesting, trying to figure out what's going to go wrong before doing it, actually. And we consider we are in a really good space for scaling geographically. Actually, our main concern as a group for scaling geographically is on the commercial side, on some other departments, because there is some repetitive work that needs to be done. There is some input and some work to be done for a new country. That just happens with every country. You cannot work around it. But technically speaking, we are a lot better prepared to do it. But then we get new and more challenges, and it's always fun.
Yeah, like the conversation goes to recruitment, to skills. So I have lots of questions there. But one last question about the highest level of the CTO role, implications in an organization. Let's talk about decision making. We kind of, and you've also discussed a bit about velocity from your team perspective, like velocity, relative estimations, how reliable is that, and things like this. So there are signs you are looking at velocity of your team. How efficient is, I know, the decision making around the board, and what do you think about the idea, the prospect of limiting the number of decisions that give work to teams at the highest level of the organization? Not engaging with the decision, it's still a decision. Huh? So like things to be done, like new features, new things to be improved, that you take with your executive management.
Right. Okay, so I think that there's a few aspects here. It's been a struggle since the beginning, deciding what to do and what to do first and what to postpone. And we never had the instinct of saying we will not do this. So everybody was pitching ideas, and we really thought of implementing everything, and we're gonna get to a point where everything gets implemented, which is of course not realistic. I think naturally we are limiting the number of decisions currently, the ones that involve technology at least. It's because we have a strong grasp on our ability to build new stuff or change the existing ones. So what happens is that I, as a CTO, would come from the technology side and share with the other executives, okay, this is our capacity, this is what we can do, these are some rough estimations on our side. We need to take a decision on the product roadmap and prioritize, and everybody needs to be aware that some things will not happen. So maybe some things we'll move them into a so-called ice box right now, or we move them further down the road on the roadmap. We might never do them, but I think the crucial part is that if we just say, let's park it, let's move it further down the road, we don't invest time and energy in it right now. And then a second important thing about decision making is that we strive to make more data-driven decisions within Flip. So not having a technology department back when I joined, this was one of the pillars within technology. How do we use our data? because Flip had data and we kept piling things on top of that data and our data models to start leveraging them. So we've started with a very small business intelligence department, which started taking data and grinding it and mixing it into all sorts of reports. And now having a full board within Flip, every department has their own reporting needs, and we try to provide as much data as possible. So we try to look at data. One thing that we've changed in more recent months was that we've started, we moved into some business case decision making, if you'd like. So whenever we have an idea of a project or something that needs to be built or changed, we try to create a small business case around it. We try to attach a technology cost on top of that, be it outsourcing, be it we build it ourselves, third party, off the shelf, you name it. And then try to decide if there's going to be return on that particular initiative and if it conflicts with other departments. And it's not just technology. So sometimes we compete over maybe some more operational stuff, capacity within the service team that refurbishes the devices, or customer support, or you name it.
The BI team is in your team?
Yes.
How many direct reports you have?
In total, close to 30 people, 28, 29, something like that.
Okay. But in terms of immediate leadership, like people, VCs, VP of engineering, head of development, head of product, do you have this kind of roles?
No, we do not. Maybe it's a bit of a longer story, but I like something which I call emergent leadership and emergent decision-making or emergent processes and stuff like that, which by my definition is that we do not implement a particular process or implement a particular model within our teams if we do not solve a problem that we already have. Now, again, this is a two-sided story, because this means that you initially feel some pains, and after you feel the pains and the problems, that's when you intervene and solve some of them. Luckily, as a startup and starting fresh without a team and building a team, we had this luxury of experimenting a lot and trying different things. Learning from our mistakes, and then introducing the right processes so that we make our lives a little bit better. And this happens with the team structures as well. So we have people playing a Scrum Master role, we have people playing a team leader role, which were all quite emergent, I'd say. So people naturally kind of aspired to these kind of roles and positions and found their own fit within the teams. I find that works best. It's because it's something that people want to do. It's not like a technical manager who used to be a really good developer, but not necessarily a really good manager, and they don't want to be there and they don't like management work and stuff like that, and you just promote them because they were the strongest developer, right? But rather give space to people to actually emerge within these particular roles. So now on the more technical side of things, I encourage our teams to work very closely together. It's not always perfect, but they get in touch quite often and try to share as much as possible. But I would rather prefer the teams take their own technical decisions. Whenever there's, I don't know, things like preferences or flavor things, and the team cannot reach a particular technical decision, we try to get together and take the decision together. I would never take a technical decision for and with my teams, because that's why I hired smarter people than myself. They know how to do their job, and I'm just going to be there to facilitate their decision-making process whenever they get stuck into that.
Say something about the skills of your team. What's the landscape on very fast forward? Technology stack in general, and then the most important skills you like to be very careful.
Right. I was mentioning a little bit earlier, I was mentioning taking a risk on exposing yourself on several technologies. That's something that we've done in Flip. So we have different parts of the application in different technologies. It's something that we've we were aware that we were doing that, but we've done it. It was something that we sacrificed for some speed and moving our product roadmap forward. So we basically have our services hosted in GCP, in Google Cloud, and then our backend and frontend is currently a mix. On the frontend, we're using both React and Vue.js. On the backend side, we're working with some Java, we're working with some Node. So there's again a kind of mix of technologies, which we sometimes feel because it's a bit more difficult nowadays to move some particular projects or new parts of the application into a particular team that has the capacity but doesn't have the skill set. But then at the same time, it's something that we need to consider when we prioritize our roadmap. It's one of the technology constraints that we currently have, but we've been lucky enough to be able to juggle around these kind of challenges. Yeah, and that's about it in a nutshell. It's not always easy, but we are trying, just to conclude this, we are trying to get on a slimmer thread in terms of technologies and let's say programming languages. And one important part is leveraging third parties and off the shelf whenever we can do that as well, to make our lives a bit easier.
Okay, between building yourself and buying on-the-shelf products, do you have any advice here? At least what you do? Can you tell the proportions?
I would say our proportions are a bit more skewed in building ourselves at Flip, a bit more than I would like it to be.
A bit more.
That's because we have a very bespoke platform. So our platform is very custom built. So it's rather difficult nowadays to actually bring in some off-the-shelf and integrate some off-the-shelf things. There's a reasonable excuse around that why this is happening currently. It's because the platform, when it was initially developed and when we, let's say, inherited the application and the platform, it was built for a totally different purpose than it serves today, right? So the business was a lot smaller, the stocks were a lot smaller. So we were under the impression that the platform is good enough back at the time. And all of a sudden we've started in our hyper growth phase, and we've started expanding, and now we have a rather bespoke and custom platform build. So it's a bit more difficult. So nowadays, just because we're skewed towards too many things that we've built ourselves, we try to leverage any off-the-shelf or third-party integration we can find out there. And it's probably difficult to advise around a particular percentage. The way I would decide is trying to understand the cost behind the things you do. And technology is expensive, we all know that. And the return that you get, and keeping in mind scalability and having your focus on the future as well, because you might integrate something that works really well today, but costs might explode once it scales up, so it's not very scalable. Maybe it's going to hinder your process when you want to build some new stuff. So it's never an easy decision, and it's not something that I could recommend do this or do that as a first preference.
Okay. And getting back to the skills now, you've talked about technical stack. How do you define seniority for your team? Do you have a scale? Do you have how do you look at seniority, and how important is that for your team?
Well, not so much. Again, something that we could probably do a little bit better, but based on my maybe flawed principles of emergent leadership, I was mentioning a little bit earlier. For me, skill-wise, I would rather focus, and I focused on the more soft skills, I would call them. So more on the personality and the desire and motivation and what drives an individual and how they work together with other people. Because technology, you can learn a programming language, right? And we've had people coming in as a front-end developer, they're now only doing backend. We've leveraged some talent within Flip from different departments. We have people that have reskilled, or they have a professional reconversion, and they have joined the technology team because they have really strong soft attributes, let's call them, and that's really important to me. Of course, you need to keep a balance of seniority, and you will be looking for more technical skills or less technical skills so that you round up and shape up your team nicely. But for myself, having the opportunity to build a team from scratch, I was also able to be quite flexible in terms of seniority. Now, moving forward, learning is a rather important process for us. Luckily, we have to do everything. So we're not like a big organization that has 10 people working on stocks, and that's it. I used to work with really large, like 100 teams for a customer, and we had 10 people working on a particular domain of the application. Now here we have to do everything. So we both learn the business at the same time, but we challenge ourselves technically into getting better. There's no particular ranking. We don't call people junior developer, senior DevOps, and stuff like that. It's
I'm seeking for a short answer. Do you do recruitment yourself or you delegate that?
A bit more delegating today. I used to do a lot of recruitment. I got some technical recruitment help in the beginning. I'm doing a bit more nowadays, but I do try to have like a final discussion and have my 2 cents with the other interviewers about
Validate in a sense?
Sorry?
You have the final go, validating a profile or not?
Yeah, but I tend to decide together with the other people from the organization that have been involved. Again, I trust my people quite a lot, and if they say no to somebody, that's going to be a no. They're going to say yes. I will not challenge them. Mostly, I'm just going to look for some side things that are maybe not impacting their direct project or something like that.
And onboarding, learning one-on-ones with people, who's doing that? You or you delegate that?
I mostly delegate. I have this cliche open doors policy, which I would like people to take more advantage. I know it sounds silly, but I don't set one-on-ones with people because I sometimes have the anxiety behind it. There's a voice inside my head saying that I'm wasting people's time, and if they need if they need something, if I can help them with anything, they will come to me and tell me. There are some one-on-ones happening with Scrum Masters and team leaders in the teams, but I try to keep things as open as possible with everybody. And we've even moved away from all hands. We had all hands in technology, but they kind of turned into some kind of status reporting and what team does what and stuff like that. So we didn't quite like it. It wasn't useful for them. It wasn't useful for me as a CTO. And nowadays I try to just get together with an entire team, with a unit, and look at the more painful things within smaller groups.
A question from the audience. What was the memorable, important challenge you or a team you managed had to face from a technical point of view?
Let me think about it. Maybe Black Friday. I was mentioning Black Friday earlier. Was an interesting one because Black Friday is so important in commerce, in e-commerce, and there's actually not just Black Friday, but there's the peak period where you get Black Friday and Christmas Day and so on and so forth. And you need your website to be able to actually scale up quite a lot. And it was challenging because we were just setting up our platform engineering to have it a little bit better. And it turned out that, for example, Google Cloud, their auto-scaling mechanism for the resources that Google Cloud allocates, their algorithm is definitely not a silver bullet. It's not a one-size-fits-all, right? So we've seen problems, and latencies were going all over the place. And we've had to sacrifice some cost. Let's say we had some increased cost because for Black Friday we had to manually scale things up, and we had amazing colleagues who were monitoring the Black Friday weekend all over the weekend and manually adjusting the resources within GCP, because GCP would not scale automatically the way we would like it to do. Now we are investigating ways of learning and teaching GCP to some scripting so that it reacts to the proper events and scales properly, so that we're not burning money. But maybe that was a good example, making sure that everything runs smoothly before Black Friday for a website that was at the time not prepared for the huge traffic that was coming in. We had 100% uptime, just to brag about it a bit.
yeah, seems to be a lot of pressure common in this space. Huh? But, please, for the audience, and remember this this session is recorded and your team might see it. If there is one quality your team is appreciating you, what is that?
I hope maybe being honest. I really hope it's being honest because I feel like respecting one another and being honest and treating people like adults. Maybe this one is a better one, like treating people like adults, right? And treating them the way you want to be treated. I hope that that's something that they appreciate.
And the executive management?
Let's say brutal honesty. It's not always a pleasant discussion, but I think it's something that's appreciated, that we don't beat around the bush. We don't sell illusions from technology. We say things how they are, and really helps us in working together.
We are heading to the last minutes of this session. Florin, if there is something you'd like the audience to leave with, something, only one thing that you want them to remember from this CTO talk, your advice, what is that for them?
Let's see. I think the one thing I care about most is caring about people around you. I feel like if there was one advice I could offer anyone in a CTO role or any other role, is take really good care of the people around you in all directions, because I strongly feel like they will take care of you in your CTO role back in turn. So that's something that I try to keep very close to my heart, is taking care of the people around myself.
And they do take care of you also.
Yeah, 110% always. So it comes back with interest.
Okay, so it works.
Yes, for me, it has always worked, and it's something that I'll probably never give up in my leadership and management roles.
Florin, thank you for your time. I'm very sorry for the technical problems we had at the beginning. So, but we should keep the schedule as it is, because people, I suppose, they have other meetings, events afterwards. Maybe we hear again with you in 1 year to see how things evolve. Thank you for your time. This CTO talk was recorded, will become available on pentalog.com, and see you at the next CTO talk. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.